The universe was vast, filled with millions of stars and countless planets. Among them, some civilizations thrived, while others remained silent. But one day, something extraordinary happened. A strange signal was detected, its source from a distant part of the galaxy, so far that no one had ever ventured there before. The signal was faint, almost impossible to understand, yet there was no mistake. It was a call for help. The signal reached a deep space communication hub. At first, no one paid it much attention. It wasn't uncommon for signals to come through, most of them nothing more than interference. But then, the message became clearer, its urgency growing with each passing second. It was not random noise. It was a message from a civilization in distress. At the center of the command room, a group of humans and alien officers stood, staring at the data screens. The signal was strong enough now for them to identify its origins, a planet located in a star system so remote that no ship had ever made contact with it. The message was coming from an unknown alien species, one that the galaxy had never encountered before. "Can you make sense of it?" Captain Rakor, the leader of the human fleet, asked. He was a seasoned warrior, a Deathworlder who had seen and survived countless battles. He was used to facing challenges, but this was different. This wasn't a threat. They could sense that. It was something else. One of the alien officers, a sharp-eyed Xanthelian, adjusted the translator and shook his head. "It's hard to decipher," he admitted, "but the message is clear enough. They need help. They're asking for aid. Their world is dying." The tension in the room grew thick. A dying world meant one of two things: either an unavoidable disaster or an enemy so powerful that no one could stand against it. The crew felt the weight of the situation pressing down on them. Who were these aliens? What kind of trouble had they gotten into? And why had they chosen now, of all times, to call for help? Captain Rakor paced the floor, his mind racing. The message was too vague. There were too many unknowns. The planet in question was isolated, and its civilization seemed to be on the brink of collapse. Why hadn't anyone heard from them before? What made them decide to reach out now? "Who sent this message?" Captain Rakor muttered under his breath, but his voice was loud enough for the room to hear. He turned back to the data console, hoping to find some clue that could explain the situation. There must be more. This can't be all they sent. The alien officer typed rapidly into the console, searching for more information. The signal had been traced back to its source, but it was still incomplete. Suddenly, the screen flickered. A new piece of data appeared. "The message, it's stopping," the officer said with alarm. "It's as if they were cut off." Rakor's fists clenched. Something happened. They were interrupted. Everyone in the room fell silent. It was as if the universe itself had decided that it wasn't ready to reveal the truth. The team had no idea what kind of trouble awaited them. Was this an attack? A trap? Or was it something even more sinister? Rakor's mind raced. The Deathworlder fleet was one of the most feared forces in the galaxy, known for their unmatched strength and battle-hardened crews. But even they had their limits. The uncertainty of what lay ahead was unnerving. Who would answer this call? Who could help a civilization that was so far out of reach? And why had they sent a message so cryptic, only for it to be cut off before it could be completed? "We need to go," Captain Rakor finally said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. "We'll respond to their call. It's our duty. But we need to be prepared for anything. We don't know what we'll find out there." The decision was made. The Deathworlder fleet would go. They would answer the mysterious call, even though they knew so little about the situation. But something in Rakor's gut told him this wasn't going to be an ordinary mission. No, this was something bigger. A test. A trial that would push them to their limits. The officers began preparations, but there was a strange unease in the air. Everyone felt it, though none of them could quite explain why. The unknown had a way of creating fear, even in the bravest of hearts. Yet, as the fleet began to move toward the distant star system, They knew one thing for sure. The galaxy was about to change. The fate of an alien world rested on their shoulders. The silence in the room grew heavy as the Deathworlder fleet made its course. A sense of dread filled the air. What awaited them at their destination? And would they be able to save the alien civilization? Or would they be too late? As the fleet moved further into the unknown, the message lingered in their minds. They're asking for help, Captain Rakor thought. But are we too late? Is there anything left to save? The uncertainty gnawed at them, but one thing was clear. The Deathworlders had answered the call. The journey had begun. The Deathworlder fleet moved silently through the vast emptiness of space, the stars glittering faintly in the distance. On board the massive warships, the crew was preparing for what was ahead. The sense of uncertainty hung in the air like a thick fog. There were no clear answers, only questions. Captain Rakor stood at the helm of the lead ship, his gaze fixed on the forward screens. His mind raced with possibilities. What kind of civilization could need their help so badly? Why had they chosen the Deathworlders? And why was the message cut off just when it seemed they might learn something important? "Captain, we've entered the star system," one of the officers called from the communication station. "We'll be at their planet in less than an hour." Rakor nodded, though his thoughts were far from the coordinates. "Stay alert," he ordered. "We don't know what we're walking into." The officers moved quickly, checking systems and preparing for any scenario. The atmosphere on the ship was tense, as if everyone was bracing for something. Despite their reputation as the most fearsome warriors in the galaxy, the Deathworlders weren't invincible. They knew there were dangers beyond their understanding. As they drew closer to the alien planet, the mystery deepened. The signal they had received was faint, barely enough to be traced to its source. Now, with each passing minute, they were more certain of one thing. The aliens were in desperate need, but what exactly they needed was still unclear. "Visuals up on screen," Rakor commanded. The screen flickered, and a distant planet came into view. It was covered in swirling clouds of thick, greenish gases, with patches of dark land barely visible through the atmosphere. The planet looked strange, alien, but it was the signs of decay that drew their attention. It didn't look like a thriving world. The planet seemed to be dying. "This is where the message came from," Rakor muttered, his brow furrowed. "Yes, Captain. The signal originated from there," the officer confirmed. "But it's odd. There's no major space traffic, no indication of other civilizations. It's isolated." Rakor's eyes narrowed. The isolation of the planet was unsettling. A planet with no contact with the outside world. What kind of species would choose that? Or perhaps they didn't have a choice. "We're not turning back now," Rakor said with determination. "Set course for the surface. We'll land in one of the more stable areas. We need to gather information." As the ships descended into the planet's atmosphere, a feeling of unease settled over the crew. It was one thing to respond to a distress signal, but it was another to land on a dying world and face whatever secrets it held. The atmosphere of the planet was thick, filled with gases that made it hard to see clearly. The ships maneuvered carefully, the hulls groaning under the strain of passing through the dense clouds. Rakor gripped the armrest of his chair, his sharp eyes scanning the view screen for anything unusual. Warning, the ship's navigation system alerted. Gravitational anomalies detected. Adjusting flight path. Rakor's heart skipped a beat. Gravitational anomalies were rare. Something was wrong with the planet's structure, something unnatural. It could be a sign of some kind of unstable core, or perhaps a weapon of some kind. "Steady," Rakor said calmly, his voice betraying none of the concern he felt. "Proceed with caution." The ships moved through the clouds, finally breaking into the open sky. Below them, the ground was cracked and barren, a desolate landscape of dried rivers and fallen mountains. The alien civilization that once thrived here seemed to have vanished, leaving behind only the ruins of a once great society. "We've got a landing zone up ahead," an officer called. "It looks safe." Raycor's gaze remained fixed on the landscape below. His instincts told him to be cautious, but the need to uncover the truth about what had happened to this world pushed him forward. The crew followed his lead and began preparations for landing. As the ships touched down, the ground shook slightly under the weight of the landing crafts. The silence outside was deafening. No birds, no animals, not even the sound of wind. It was as though the entire planet had fallen into a deep slumber. The hatch opened, and Captain Raycor stepped out first, followed by his team of elite soldiers. The air was thick and dry, and the ground beneath their boots felt uneven. The faint remnants of a once thriving city could be seen in the distance, but it was in ruins. Buildings toppled, streets cracked, and not a soul in sight. "Stay alert," Raycor said. "Something isn't right here." The team moved cautiously, scanning the area. The only sound was the crunch of their footsteps on the cracked earth. The atmosphere felt oppressive, as if the very air carried a sense of foreboding. No communication from the surface, no signs of life. Only the ruins remained. "Captain," one of the soldiers called. "Over here." Raycor moved quickly to the soldier's side, where the body of an alien lay in the street. It was unlike anything Raycor had ever seen. The creature was small, with translucent skin, and its body appeared to be withered, as if it had been drained of life. Raycor knelt beside it, his hand hovering over the body. He could sense something odd about the creature, something unnatural. "This wasn't a natural death," he said grimly. The soldiers exchanged uneasy looks. If the alien species had perished like this, what had happened to the rest of their people? Were they all dead? Or worse, had they become something else? Raycor stood up, his mind racing with questions. "We need to find answers. Now." The Deathworlders had answered the call, but the deeper they ventured into the alien world, the more questions piled up. This was no simple rescue mission. It was a mystery. And the truth could be far more dangerous than they ever expected. Unearthing the secrets. The Deathworlders stood in the eerie silence of the abandoned city, their boots crunching on the cracked and broken streets. The air was heavy, leaden with the scent of decay. The crew moved cautiously, every step echoing in the vast emptiness. Something about this planet felt wrong. Dead, even though there were signs of a once thriving civilization. Buildings stood like hollow shells, their windows shattered, and the ground was cracked with deep fissures, as if the planet itself was slowly dying. Captain Raycor surveyed the landscape, his sharp eyes scanning for any sign of life. The silence was unsettling, but it was the absence of life forms that truly disturbed him. The planet seemed lifeless, as though it had been abandoned in a hurry, but there was no sign of conflict. No battle scars, no remnants of war. Raycor signaled to his team to spread out and search for any signs of survivors or clues. They moved with practiced precision, knowing that every second counted. The team's elite soldiers, all seasoned veterans from the harshest death worlds, moved silently through the ruins, scanning their surroundings with a mixture of caution and readiness. "Captain," one of the soldiers called out from the corner of the street, "You need to see this." Raycor hurried over, his mind already racing through possibilities. What could it be? Another body? A weapon? As he rounded the corner, his eyes locked on something that immediately sent a chill down his spine. The soldier was standing in front of an old, crumbled building, its walls cracked and broken. Inside, on the floor, was a strange device. It was unlike anything Raycor had ever seen. It resembled an oblong crystal, glowing faintly with an eerie blue light. Its surface was smooth, almost alive, and pulses of energy seemed to flow through it in rhythmic patterns. It hummed quietly, almost like it was waiting for something. Raycor kneeled next to it, his hand hovering just above the strange artifact. It was unlike anything from any known civilization, even the most advanced. His instincts told him that this was important, perhaps even the key to everything. "Bring the tech team," he ordered, his voice firm. "I want to know what this is." Moments later, the tech team arrived, and the soldiers stepped back to give them space. They examined the device carefully, their specialized scanners whirring to life. After a few moments, one of the technicians spoke up. "It's alien technology, Captain. Very old, but still active. It's like some sort of communication device." Raker's heart skipped a beat. A communication device. Could it be connected to the distress signal they had received? "Can you activate it?" he asked. The technician hesitated. "It's strange. It doesn't seem to follow any known technology patterns. But I think we can try." With a steady hand, the technician placed his fingers on the glowing crystal. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a low hum filled the air, and the device's glow intensified. Suddenly, a projection flickered to life in front of them. An image of an alien, their body translucent, frail, and barely visible through the shimmering light. The alien's face was marked with desperation and fear, and as it began to speak, Rakor felt a deep sense of dread settle over him. The alien's voice was soft and distant, as if it was struggling to be heard. "Please, we are dying. Our world, it's collapsing. The darkness, it comes. Please, you are our only hope." The message was broken, fragmented. The projection flickered and sputtered, as if the alien's strength was fading with each passing word. Then, before it could finish, the light around the alien flickered and died. The device went silent again, leaving only a faint, lingering hum in the air. Rakor stood frozen, his mind racing. What had just happened? The alien had spoken of a darkness, something coming to destroy their world. Was this the cause of the planet's decay? Was this the true reason for the distress signal? He turned to the technician, his voice cold. "Can you trace where this message came from?" The technician nodded. "We'll need to access more data from the device, but I think we can get coordinates." Rakor didn't wait for confirmation. "Do it. We need to know where this message came from, and why it's so urgent." As the tech team worked on extracting the coordinates, the rest of the Deathworlder soldiers stood guard, their weapons ready. The tension in the air was palpable. Rakor could feel the weight of the decision ahead. Whatever the alien's message meant, they were already in too deep to back out now. Minutes later, the technician spoke up again. "I've got the coordinates, Captain. It's coming from a location deep beneath the surface of the planet." Rakor's heart raced. Beneath the surface. Was this where the darkness had come from? The idea of traveling underground on a dying planet filled him with dread, that they had no choice. The Deathworlders had been called, and they had answered. They couldn't turn back now. "We move out in 10 minutes, Rakor ordered. "Prepare for underground extraction." As they set off toward the underground location, Rakor's mind raced. What kind of alien civilization could fall to such a fate? And what exactly was this darkness the alien had warned them about? The deeper they ventured into the heart of the planet, the closer they came to uncovering the deadly truth. And with each step, Rakor felt a growing sense of unease. Whatever lay beneath this alien world, it would not be easy to face. Into the depths of the unknown. The underground entrance was hidden within the ruins of what seemed like a once thriving city. Now, the dark chasm below was the only thing left, a black maw that swallowed all light. The ground was cracked, and strange vines crawled up the sides of the cliff that led down into the abyss. The air around them grew thick, and the temperature dropped, sending shivers through the team. Rakor could sense the fear in his soldiers, even the most hardened among them. "Stay alert," Rakor commanded as he led his team down the narrow path into the darkness. "This is what we came for. No one strays from the line." "Got it." His voice was firm, cutting through the silence. The team nodded, and they continued their descent. The further they went, the more oppressive the silence became. There were no sounds of wildlife, no echoes of wind, nothing. It was as though the entire planet was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. It felt unnatural, and it weighed on Rakor's mind. Deathworlders were used to harsh environments, but this place was something entirely different. The glow from their helmets illuminated the walls around them, revealing strange symbols etched into the rock. These markings were unlike any language Raykor had ever seen. They looked ancient, yet still faintly glowing, as if they were alive. Something about them seemed familiar, yet out of reach, like a memory from a past life, one that was better forgotten. "What do you make of these?" Raykor asked, turning to one of his linguists. She squinted at the symbols, tracing her fingers over them. "They're old, very old, but they don't match any known civilization we've encountered. This could be something else entirely. Maybe even a warning." Raykor nodded grimly. "Keep your guard up. If there's a warning here, I want to know what it is before we get too far." As they ventured deeper, the temperature continued to drop, and the air grew thick with the smell of damp earth. The tunnel seemed endless, stretching on in a straight line, with no sign of any branches or exits. Raykor felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Something was wrong, but he couldn't place it. After what felt like hours, they finally reached the end of the tunnel. There, standing before them, was a massive door. It was unlike anything they had seen before, taller than any building they had encountered, and made of some dark metal, covered in the same symbols that adorned the walls. The door was sealed tight, with no apparent means of entry. "This is it," Raykor said, his voice low. "Whatever's behind this door is what we're here for." "Can we open it?" one of the soldiers asked. Raykor studied the door closely, examining every detail. There were no visible handles, no buttons, no way to force it open. But something about the door seemed alive. The way it shimmered, the faint hum it emitted, reminded him of the alien device they had found earlier. "We need to find a way inside," Raykor said. "There has to be a mechanism or a key." One of the techs stepped forward, a scanner in hand. She began to scan the door, her eyes narrowing as the device beeped softly. "It's a biometric lock," she said after a moment. "It needs a specific signal to unlock." "A signal?" Raykor asked, his mind racing. Could it be linked to the device they had found earlier? The thought made sense, and he ordered the technician to bring the device to the door. They carefully placed the glowing crystal against the door. The moment it touched the surface, the symbols on the door began to glow, reacting to the device. The humming grew louder, and the door began to vibrate, slowly sliding open with a heavy metallic groan. The team tensed, weapons raised, ready for anything. When the door finally opened fully, what lay beyond took their breath away. The room was vast, far larger than anything they had expected. The air inside was cold, but crisp, almost fresh. But what drew their attention was the central object in the room. It was a giant sphere, floating slightly above the ground, surrounded by glowing tendrils of energy that pulsed in time with the now-thrumming device. The sphere was completely smooth, with no discernible markings or signs of age. It hovered silently, radiating an almost hypnotic light. It was beautiful in a way, but also unnerving. "This is it," Raykor whispered. "This is what they were trying to warn us about." As if on cue, the sphere emitted a low, vibrating hum. The lights in the room flickered, and a deep voice, filled with static, boomed through the chamber. "Welcome," it said. "You are the ones who answered the call. You are the ones who will see the truth." The voice seemed to echo from all directions, its words reverberating inside their heads. Raykor's heart raced as the full weight of their mission began to sink in. "What truth?" he asked, his voice shaky but resolute. The sphere's hum deepened, and the voice responded. "The truth about what is coming. The truth about the darkness that will consume all life." The air in the room grew thick, and the energy tendrils surrounding the sphere pulsed in rapid succession. Something was about to happen, something that would change everything. The Deathworlders had come to this world for answers, but the answers they would receive were far more terrifying than anything they could have imagined. The atmosphere in the chamber had grown oppressive, heavy with the weight of the voice's words. The glowing tendrils surrounding the sphere pulsed faster, casting eerie shadows across the walls. The Deathworlders stood frozen, their weapons ready, yet their instincts told them this wasn't a battle they could fight with force alone. This was something deeper, something more complex. Raykor stepped forward, his boots echoing in the silence, breaking the tension that had settled over the group. His heart raced as the voice continued to resonate in his mind. "What is the darkness you speak of?" Raykor's voice rang out, strong but laced with a hint of uncertainty. He had faced wars, horrors, and death, but nothing like this. The sphere's hum deepened, sending vibrations through the floor. Slowly, a holographic image began to materialize in the center of the room. At first, it was a swirl of static, but then, like a slow-motion ripple in water, an image began to take shape, a vast, shadowy force, spreading across the galaxy, consuming everything in its path. The image showed worlds crumbling into nothingness, entire civilizations falling to dust. Swarms of dark energy consumed everything in their path, planets, stars, and lives. It was a force beyond comprehension, so vast and terrible that the Deathworlders felt a chill run down their spines. "This is the darkness," the voice intoned. "An unstoppable force, born of ancient beings, older than the stars themselves. It is coming, and no one can stop it unless the Deathworlders rise." The word hung in the air, filling the room with a sense of impending doom. The team exchanged nervous glances, but Raykor remained steadfast, his brow furrowed as he tried to process the magnitude of what he was hearing. This wasn't just a battle for survival. This was a fight for existence itself. "Why us?" Raykor asked, his voice steady, but his mind racing. "What makes us capable of stopping this force?" The voice responded, its tone deep and sorrowful. "Because the Deathworlders are the only ones capable of enduring the coming storm. Your world, your strength, your very essence is the key. The darkness fears what you have become, but it will stop at nothing to destroy you." The hologram shifted, showing the Deathworlders in their full glory, their strength and resilience standing in stark contrast to the shadowy force that loomed on the horizon. Raykor's team watched in awe as the vision displayed the legendary prowess of their kind. Warriors forged by the harshest environments, able to endure and fight where others would perish. "But why haven't we heard of this before?" one of the soldiers questioned, his voice filled with doubt. "How can we fight something so powerful?" "There are few who know of this force," the voice explained. "It has remained hidden for millennia, a secret kept by those who wish to see the galaxy consumed. But now, it is too late. The darkness has awakened, and only the Deathworlders can prevent its spread." Raykor's mind raced, calculating the odds, weighing the risks. He knew that they were outmatched, that no battle could ever be won without sacrifice. But there was no turning back now. The stakes had never been higher. The entire universe was on the edge of destruction, and they were the only ones capable of stopping it. He turned to his team, his voice unwavering. "We didn't come here for answers alone. We came here to save this galaxy, to stop this darkness. We will face whatever comes next, together. If we fail, everything falls. But we won't fail." The team nodded in unison, their faces grim but resolute. They were Deathworlders, forged by the most dangerous conditions known to existence. They had fought through the impossible, and they would fight again. A holographic image faded, and the sphere's hum softened. For a brief moment, the room was quiet, the only sound the steady breathing of the soldiers around Raykor. "This is only the beginning," the voice said softly. "The first step has been taken. But remember, no one is ever truly ready for what comes next." With that, the room fell silent again, and the Deathworlders were left standing before the looming question. How would they fight the darkness, and what terrible cost would come with their victory? Into the abyss. The chamber was silent, save for the occasional hum of the machinery around them. The weight of their mission pressed down on the Deathworlders, each of them lost in their thoughts. Raykor stood at the forefront, his mind racing. How could they face something so ancient, so powerful? The darkness that awaited them was unlike anything they had ever encountered before. It was a force that could unravel the very fabric of existence, and yet they were the ones chosen to stop it. Raykor, one of his soldiers, Drak, called out, his voice breaking through the silence. What now? How do we stop this thing? Raykor turned to face his team, their eyes full of uncertainty. They had faced battles, enemies, and impossible odds before, but this was different. This was not just a fight for survival. This was a war against an enemy that could not be seen, only felt. The very idea of the darkness was terrifying. And yet, Raykor could not afford to show fear. We gather allies, he said, his voice steady. We can't face this alone. The darkness is coming, and we need everyone we can get. The first step is to find those who can help us. The team nodded in agreement, their resolve beginning to form. There were still other factions in the galaxy, other powerful beings who had yet to feel the threat of the darkness. They had to reach them before it was too late. But as Raykor looked around at his team, he knew that their path wouldn't be easy. The galaxy was vast, and time was running out. They would have to fight every step of the way to gather the strength needed to stand against the ancient force. And even then, there was no guarantee of success. We have to move quickly, Raykor said, taking a deep breath. Every moment we waste is a moment the darkness grows stronger. We'll use every resource we have, every ally we can find. We will not fail. The team began to gather their gear, preparing for the journey ahead. They knew the stakes were higher than ever. Their very lives were at risk. And yet, they had no choice but to fight. The galaxy was depending on them. The journey to find allies was fraught with dangers. The Deathworlders traveled across uncharted space, encountering hostile forces and strange, untamed planets along the way. The darkness was already spreading, creeping into the corners of the galaxy, corrupting everything it touched. They encountered worlds already lost to the Force, their once thriving civilizations reduced to ruins. There was no time to waste. They had to keep moving forward. But it wasn't just the physical dangers they had to face. As the team traveled deeper into the unknown, they began to feel the weight of the darkness closing in around them. It wasn't something they could see, but it was something they could sense. A chill in the air, a sense of dread that lingered no matter where they went. They could feel the darkness watching them, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Raykor's thoughts were consumed with the mission, but there were moments, fleeting moments, when he would look at his team and see the fear in their eyes. They were warriors, yes, but even they couldn't deny the power of the force they were up against. We're getting closer, Raykor muttered, glancing at the star map. We'll reach the next system soon. If we're lucky, we'll find allies there. The team pressed on, determined to find the help they desperately needed. As they entered the system, they found signs of activity, a distress signal, a warning. Someone was reaching out for help. Raykor, Drak said, pointing to the screens. Another cry for help. It's coming from that planet. Raykor's heart raced. Another world in need. The darkness was spreading faster than they had anticipated. Without hesitation, he gave the order to land. The ship touched down on the alien planet, its surface barren and scarred by the forces of destruction. The air was thick with the smell of decay. The team stepped out, weapons at the ready, their senses alert to every movement. We're not alone, Raykor said, his voice low. Ahead of them, they saw a group of aliens, strange, tall beings with pale skin and glowing eyes. They were kneeling, their heads bowed in fear. They looked up as the Deathworlders approached, their eyes filled with desperation. You came, one of the aliens whispered, their voice trembling. You heard our call. Raykor nodded, his heart heavy with the knowledge that the galaxy's fate was resting on their shoulders. We heard your cry, and we'll do everything we can to stop the darkness. The alien's eyes widened in gratitude, but also in fear. "You don't know what you're up against," they said softly. "The darkness is everywhere. It will come for you too." Raykor placed a hand on the alien's shoulder, offering a rare moment of comfort. "We faced worse. We will fight until the end." As they began to make plans to evacuate the aliens and prepare for the next stage of their mission, Raykor couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking straight into the abyss. The darkness was closing in, and time was running out. The team had traveled to countless worlds, each one more desperate than the last. They had gathered a small army of alien races, each of them willing to fight against the growing darkness. But despite their efforts, the feeling of dread only seemed to intensify. The darkness was not only spreading across the galaxy, it was coming for them. Raykor and his team had managed to rally a coalition of forces, but they knew they couldn't stop the inevitable. The ancient force they were fighting was beyond anything they had ever encountered. It was an enemy that wasn't bound by the laws of space and time, an enemy that didn't fight with weapons or tactics. It consumed. It destroyed. It eradicated all that it touched. "We're out of time," Raykor said, looking out over the fleet of ships gathered for the final battle. "The darkness is closing in. If we don't make our stand now, we may never have another chance." The fleet was a patchwork of ships from different worlds, each one unique and powerful in its own right. Some were sleek and fast, built for precision strikes. Others were massive, built to withstand the harshest of conditions. They had all come together for one reason: to fight for their survival. Raykor knew the odds were slim. The darkness was relentless, and their forces, though strong, were nothing compared to the ancient evil they faced. But they had no choice. They had fought for so long, traveled so far, and made so many sacrifices. To turn back now would be the greatest failure of all. "Everyone ready?" Raykor asked, turning to his team. "We're ready," Drak replied, his voice steady. "We've trained for this. We've prepared for this." The others nodded in agreement, their faces grim but resolute. They had fought countless battles. But this one was different. This wasn't just about defeating an enemy. This was about saving the galaxy from annihilation. This was about ensuring that the light of life could continue to shine. Raykor's thoughts turned to the aliens they had rescued, the worlds they had saved. They were depending on them, and Raykor couldn't fail them now. The Deathworlders had fought for their lives, and the lives of others countless times before. But this felt different. The stakes were higher. The darkness wasn't just another enemy to defeat. It was a force of nature, an unstoppable tide that would wash away everything in its path. "We fight to the end," Raykor said, his voice resolute. "We don't back down. We don't give up. This is our final stand, and we will win. For the galaxy." The ships began to move, the fleet pulling into formation as they made their way toward the heart of the darkness. The final battle was upon them, and there was no turning back. As they approached the dark heart of the galaxy, a chilling silence fell over the fleet. There were no stars here, no light, just an oppressive blackness that seemed to stretch on forever. The darkness was everywhere, its influence seeping into their very souls, testing their resolve. Raykor's heart raced as the ships moved closer. The alien forces they had gathered were tense, waiting for the order to strike. But even the most battle-hardened warriors couldn't help but feel the weight of the darkness pressing in from all sides. "There it is," Raykor said, pointing to the massive, shadowy mass that loomed in the distance. It was a swirling mass of dark energy, vast and ancient, pulsing with an eerie, otherworldly power. It was the source of the darkness, a force that had been gathering strength for eons, waiting for the moment when it would consume everything in its path. As the fleet closed in on the source, the darkness surged forward, wrapping around their ships like a suffocating blanket. The first strike came suddenly, an enormous wave of dark energy crashing into the fleet. Ships rocked and shook, their shields flaring as they fought to hold off the force. But it wasn't enough. One by one, the ships began to fall, their hulls torn apart by the dark energy. The darkness was too strong, too overwhelming. Raykor watched as the forces they had gathered were consumed, their screams swallowed by the void. But even in the face of such destruction, Raykor refused to give up. He was a Deathworlder, and death was something he had stared down countless times. He was not afraid of the darkness, even if it seemed impossible to defeat. He would fight until his last breath. "Rally to me," Raykor shouted, his voice rising above the chaos. "We will not fall. We will fight until the last man stands." His team rallied around him, their resolve stronger than ever. They fought with everything they had, pushing back against the darkness with every ounce of strength they could muster. But the darkness was relentless. The battle raged on for what felt like an eternity, and Raykor knew they couldn't hold out much longer. They had to do something, and fast. That was when they saw it, a small flicker of light, far in the distance. It was faint, but it was there. The light of hope. Raykor's heart surged. This was their chance. They had one final strike left in them, and they would use it. "All ships, follow me," Raykor ordered, his voice booming across the comms. The remaining ships rallied to his side, and together they launched a final, all-out attack against the darkness. Energy surged through their weapons, light cutting through the blackness as they charged toward the heart of the enemy. For a brief moment, the darkness seemed to falter. The light cut through it like a knife, weakening its hold on the galaxy. But the battle was far from over. The darkness lashed out in retaliation, its fury unmatched. In that final, desperate moment, the Deathworlders gave everything they had. And in the end, it was their bravery, their strength, their refusal to give in that turned the tide. The darkness, unable to withstand the combined might of the Deathworlders, began to crumble. The once unstoppable force faltered, and then, like a dying star, it collapsed in on itself. The galaxy was saved. But the cost was high. The Deathworlders had lost many of their own, and the galaxy would never be the same. Yet, they had won. The light had triumphed over the darkness. Raykor stood, looking out over the battlefield, the remnants of the fleet scattered across the stars. They had done it. They had saved the galaxy. The Deathworlders had answered the call, and in doing so, they had ensured that the light of life would continue to shine.